Okay, it landed in the capital. Newcastle United taking on Arsenal today, and yeah, it's the penultimate game of the season, last away game for what's been a long season for Newcastle United. And you know, this game for me has a different feel to it. When we're talking about that different feel, what we're really saying is that this isn't just your average away game for Newcastle United. It's an opportunity to not only get in the Champions League, but also to finish second, which both these teams are vying to do as we head into the season's running. So a big one on the line for Newcastle today. Warmed up with that 2-0 win over Chelsea last weekend, but hopefully today we see a similar performance to that Carabao Cup semi-final back in January when Newcastle won here 2-0. Well, Newcastle United back down at the Emirates for a second visit this season. The last one, of course, that amazing 2-0 win in the Carabao Cup semi-finals, which took Newcastle to Wembley, which of course led to the Carabao Cup win. The Newcastle lifting silverware, something that Arsenal won't be doing this season, which is an incredible thing when you look at how things were looking for them at the turn of the year. But here we are, Newcastle United Carabao Cup winners, now fighting for second place in the Premier League. Now this game, for me, it's got a totally different feel to it. It's one of them where Newcastle United know what's on the line here, Champions League place, but also the runners-up spot, which, you know, ordinarily you wouldn't be getting excited about finishing second, but for Newcastle it could cap a remarkable season for Eddie Howe and his players. When you look at all the sort of adversity they've had the 3 barren transfer windows before this as well, and they're still up there with a chance of being the second best team in the Premier League. I think that's pretty good going. But Newcastle come down here today knowing that 3 points will put them in with that real shout on the final game of the season against Everton. The key for Newcastle really is to make sure that things are in their hands going into that final game. They want control, that is the key word. Today's an opportunity to get that here at Arsenal.
Emirates Stadium, please remain in your seats. We will have a short presentation followed by a lap of appreciation by the players. Come on, you guys!
Well, Newcastle United have been beaten here 1-0 at the Emirates Stadium, and realistically today was always going to be a very tough test, but I thought in the first half Newcastle were actually very good in terms of creating chances and putting pressure on the Arsenal goal, and really should have went in with a lead at half time. Denied by David Ryder, some unbelievable saves, but at this level, if you don't take your chances, you leave the door wide open, and Arsenal weren't going to turn down the second opportunity. Newcastle in the second half didn't start the same way they did in the first period, and inevitably Arsenal got a bit of fortune in front of goal, and sadly for Newcastle, Declan Rice wasn't going to turn that down. Anthony Gordon losing the ball, dispossessed, it kind of typified the sort of sleepiness of Newcastle at the start of the second half. And then, even though they did make a good fist of it to try and get the equaliser, they couldn't force the point, and Newcastle leave here with a 1-0 defeat. Can't finish second now, going to that final game against Everton with work to do. Big game next weekend, couldn't be any tighter. Newcastle sweating on Isak's fitness, and this is going to be a very dramatic end to the season, with or without the £63 million man. So the dust is settling on Newcastle United's 1-0 defeat against Arsenal at the Emirates Stadium. It was a frustrating day in a way because Newcastle United showed they were just as good as Arsenal, as they have done on 3 previous occasions this season, and Newcastle really only have themselves to blame for not taking something from this game. The incredible stat has to be that Newcastle had 5 shots on target in the first 17 minutes and then they just couldn't add to it in the second half, couldn't test David Raya again, and yeah, they put pressure on the goal, and you know, they did create chances off target. They couldn't influence the game where and when it mattered in the second half, and yeah, the game ended in frustration really. It boiled over. I think Arsenal knew they had Newcastle exactly where they wanted them. After those 3 defeats, I think it was always going to be inevitable that Arsenal would be fired up, but yeah, look, if Newcastle had taken 1 or 2 of those chances in the first half, we could be stood here talking about a completely different narrative. We could be talking about Newcastle already in the Champions League or finishing second. Instead, it goes to that final game against Everton of all teams. Jordan Pickford coming to St James's Park. I'm sure he'll be on the wind-up. But look, Newcastle just need to do what they've done in the other 37 games. That's the top and bottom of it. And if they do, then you know, they should be safely heading away for the summer holidays with their Champions League ticket in hand. It's been a great season, whatever way you look at it. Even if the worst case scenario happens and Newcastle end up in the Europa League, they've still got into Europe again. They've still won a trophy. Champions League would be the icing on the cake, and that's what they've got to try and, you know, keep pushing for in that final 90 plus minutes of the season at St James's Park. Eddie Howe yesterday, you know, he knows that injuries are taking a toll on this squad. Alexander Isak, we're going to have to wait and see how he is after this week. He'll be getting a little bit more assessment. But I think overall, it's a day that Newcastle look back on and feel it was there for the taking, but they didn't quite manage to grasp what was in front of them. And it all bodes well for next season. Newcastle don't fear going to these grounds anymore. They don't fear going to the Emirates or Old Trafford or Tottenham, where, you know, Newcastle used to suffer big defeats at these places. It's just not even in the mindset of Eddie Howe's team. They're there to compete, and that's exactly what they did yesterday, even in defeat. And I think really the fans, no complaints. Maybe there will be a tweak to the team for the Everton game if Isak isn't fit. Does William Asula start the game? That seems to be what a lot of the fans are sort of asking for. We'll have to wait and see, because Callum Wilson is an experienced player too. Newcastle head away into a week of preparation. It's one last push now, and that's what it's got to be about for Newcastle and Eddie Howe. You know, for me, Eddie Howe, manager of the season, for where he's taken Newcastle from in such a short space of time. Yes, other managers have won stuff now, Oliver Glasner at Crystal Palace, but what Eddie Howe's done, the size of the club, the setbacks he's been dealt, it's been incredible really. So for me, Eddie Howe, manager of the season. But one last game, one last 90 plus minutes, Newcastle United have that Champions League place in their hands. They've just got to go and take it off the counter on that final game. And then after that Everton game, of course, the summer rebuilding, rejigging the squad, whatever you want to call it, will soon unfold. I think for me, Newcastle probably do need 3, 4, maybe 5 signings. I think Eddie Howe has done very well with this squad. He's taken it a long way from that team that were, you know, near the foot of the table just 4 years ago. A lot of those players still on board. Had Newcastle finished second, I think it would have put not so much pressure, it would have put a different sort of dimension on next season, because I think then people would have just automatically assumed that Newcastle are ready to challenge for the title. Now it just gives them that little bit of room to perhaps build up to finishing second next season, and then, you know, in the seasons after, challenge for the title. That's got to be the ultimate goal. I mean, the players have said it, Bruno said it the other day, Eddie Howe said it, but that's more a long-term thing. Newcastle, really, the project at the minute, feels like it's in the mid-term, and then after that, you know, Newcastle can, you know, genuinely challenge for trophies under Eddie Howe, in my opinion, because, you know, he's very much the man, as I've said earlier. He's the manager of the season for me. It's now about getting that Champions League place and then maintaining that challenge next season.